certainly be talking in general terms broadly about that. But really the core activity of this committee, and like Peter said, this committee has come a long way, has evolved, is quite active, and doesn't look at all like it used to in the very early days of health research. So basically it's to increase the value of wild blueberries based on their human health benefits. I don't need to convince anybody here that blueberries are healthy for you, and certainly we've got lots of evidence to support that now. And so in this committee, a major activity is creating a wild blueberry health research pipeline, that wild blueberries are being actively investigated in biomedicine to demonstrate the ways in which they're good for health. So the committee then does this, the HRC, the Health Research Committee, by going out and looking for good research proposals from high quality researchers to support, and then staying current on the whole domain of health research and what is happening in the whole realm of fruits, vegetables, and health, because that field has expanded hugely in the last couple of decades, wild blueberries being a really good example. And then the other big piece that the committee does, and it does it in association with the communications and marketing groups, is to basically translate those research findings, because they're pretty arcane when you see them, real, it's sophisticated science, translate those findings and build context around them so that information can be made for the right audiences and the right packages and sent out in the right ways, so that health news on wild blueberries can be conveyed to the public. So, and shaping the health message, what are we saying about blueberries? So that's fairly long-winded, but I'll touch on these themes throughout the talk. So again, we've been in this for 25 years, if you can believe that. I can barely believe it, and I was there from the start. But if you remember, I don't know if any of you do, but it really started with the whole notion of antioxidants, and a couple of papers came out about antioxidants, and blueberries in a solution had a lot of antioxidant capacity, huge amount of public interest around that. And it took someone with the energy and vision of John Sauvé and something like wild blueberries are #1 to say, boom, we are off. And that was in the early days, 25 years ago. But you can see what this is a plot of is the number of scientific publications on wild blueberries and health in the last 20 odd years. And you can see how that research has grown and grown. And the main point is that research is not about antioxidants. The antioxidants didn't turn out to be the big story. So last year, I looked in depth at the scientific literature on blueberries and health, and I consolidated it and took out a bunch of metrics and ways of thinking about it. And this is one of those. So basically, if I looked at a lot of the topic areas and look at the range of topics that were looked at and reported on, antioxidants just being one of them. And I missed it here, but the take home on all of these topics: heart health, blood sugar regulation, good blood circulation, brain health, and gut health. Those are the big domains. Difficult for marketing and promotions people to have to talk about all of those topics that seem to be totally separate topics, but it was a great challenge because that's a lot of good news. But in terms of shaping the message, I feel strongly, and I think I'm convincing people, that the message is it's about the anthocyanin pigments. And any of you during harvest, you look at your hands, you know what anthocyanins are about. These are the pigments. And that's what makes wild blueberries stand out from other fruits and vegetables. And these pigments, these anthocyanins, they're in a category of compounds that we know are interesting and bioactive. And wild blueberries have one of the highest concentrations of that healthy component of any other food available. So that's good news. We can hang our hat on that. But I wrote under there food versus medicine. When I show you the rest of this stuff, I want to just remind you, these compounds are not, they don't have the potency of drugs. They're foods. If they had the potency of drugs, we'd be using them as drugs, and we would have known that a long time ago. But these are just foods that help to promote health. They're not going to have massive effects, but they definitely have effects. So be guided by that. So another way of looking at that is in the early days, the wild industry and everybody wanted to shape the health message around antioxidants and everything flowed from antioxidants. I'm saying no, everything flows from anthocyanins. So all of those various effects that we're seeing are attributable to the anthocyanins, not entirely, but in large part. Okay, so now if we look at that, I always make the pitch that WBANA benefits greatly from related research. And to show you that, then again, these plots are of scientific publications that have come out, and you can see the years though. Wild blueberries that have wild blueberries in the title, there's only 56 of them. But meanwhile, the whole realm of blueberries, there's like, 450 of them. And if you look broadly at anthocyanins, there's 1,700 papers. So all of this research, all of that anthocyanin and blueberry research is highly relevant to wild. So we can basically tap into that research. So even though we're small, we have a big story to tell. So again, in relation to shaping the health message, this is something that came out of that analysis of the literature I did. And again, blueberries support the heart health, brain health, blood sugar, gut health. All of these topics we're now learning as the science evolves is related to a broader umbrella called metabolic regulation. And there I put stars on all of those papers that really pointed to metabolic regulation as one big umbrella that really takes in all of the other health benefits that blueberries were known for. So this could help to make messaging a little easier. So anyway, in the world of metabolic regulation, we talk about blueberries promoting metabolic health, but what does bad metabolic health looks like? Well, it looks like any one of these things all in a pool together, and many of these things do come together. Poor blood sugar control, systemic inflammation, especially associated with obesity, poor heart health, brain and cognition effects, and a lot of that, well, it's very strongly correlated with overweight and obesity, and also aging. So you think these are huge health issues now, public health issues. So if we look at where we are in terms of those major current public health issues, we're really well positioned there. What a funny line. So again, shaping the health message, I think we can say wild blueberries support whole body metabolic health because anthocyanins help all the conditions that we know are suffering when you have bad metabolic health. So again, this whole broader notion of metabolic health. So now WBANA is looking to that to kind of shape the health message. Okay, now to talk a little bit about the research pipeline. This is roughly how it works. And again, I put that little graphic up at the top just to remind us that these are now our research priorities. The committee has research priorities that they look to. And then we also emphasize human clinical research, just the human research, not the lab animals, not the test tube stuff, just the human clinical research. And we have reasons for that. So the way the committee works now is we call for pre-proposals. Let's call it the pitch, the elevator pitch. Give us a short version of what you'd like to do. And then based on what we read about from those short versions, we ask, oh, we like this. Please send us a full proposal. So then if a proposal is approved, then those people look to us for what we call a composite wild blueberry sample. So these studies, they're going to be feeding humans wild blueberry powder. We have something called a composite representative of all the production regions. We've also created a placebo. We supply all of that. Okay, then going on to what these studies look like, most of them are multi-year. So for budgeting purposes, it gets a little complicated going over multiple years. And then when these studies start, they first have to recruit volunteers because they're human studies. Oftentimes, when they're looking at some of these topics, they're looking for people who already have issues, are pre-diabetic, have high blood pressure, are overweight, or are elderly. So you have to find a particular population. That's not always easy to do. Then you have a whole research ethics approval process. Statistical design is a huge thing, and resource procurement. How are you actually going to do the study? Then when you're actually doing the study, you have an intervention period, meaning we're going to feed these people for 12 weeks, placebo or blueberries, whichever. And then there's a whole bunch of analysis from the urine. You collect the blood, you collect the testing. You've done a lot of analysis. consolidating the data, then a whole pile of statistical analysis, and then reporting. And this is where the rubber hits the road in terms of, WBANA Health Research has been there for this whole process. Now we get to put out the good news on what happened here. So the good news gets out in what the scientists put out in peer-reviewed publications. These are accepted by the scientific community. They also present those at various conferences. And at those conferences, the press is there. They're ready to pick up on these good news stories. And then the universities where this work is done, and WBANA also puts out press releases about the good news on this new research. And then there's various media and influencers, the food gurus, the health gurus, and you know what that landscape looks like now. It's vast. We're always looking at how we can get these influencers on side and get their attention. And then for us, it means that that whole narrative of how blueberries are healthy for you, we can get to build that story more and more and more, because eventually this will get more and more attention and have a more solid footing in health and nutrition recommendations. So anyway, one interesting thing from this review I did is in a lot of these papers, I looked at about 250, many of them didn't even specify what kind of blueberries they were using. So I thought, that's kind of odd. Someone's willing to do a study, but no one asks what kind of blueberries did you use. You can see our wild on there. But since then, we have produced what we call a blueberry fact sheet for researchers. I'm not going to read all this stuff, but this is all of the content that our researchers need to say, when you write your papers, when you give your talks, mention wild, say wild. Here's the graphics for wild. This is not cultivated. So we're just helping them along. We've given them all the critical information, composition, nutrient analysis, the horticultural aspects. So helping along the research there. Okay, and then an important topic is these studies are expensive. Again, the finances, I don't know that clearly. Peter probably knows more than I do. But just to talk about leveraging, because we always look about, well, is there matching funding available for something like this? There is, in some cases. When I was a scientist with Agriculture Canada working on this, Ag Canada had a lot of programs available. So you need to find yourself the person that took my place and get them to be lobbying for good leveraging and research funding for this kind of research. But anyway, it's usually the scientist that comes to us and says, we've got a program, we may be able to get matching money. But I think we need to think about this more broadly too, to think about what are these people bringing to the study? What can they do? What are they actually able to do? It's the difference between someone with a lab bench and a few test tubes and a person who's in a big medical research facility with a whole suite of capacities. So we need to think about that in terms of what these people can bring to a project. And then I want to give some good recent examples of that about how this gets leveraged. So we hope to fund a study from the Netherlands, and these people are in a medical school and they're doing state-of-the-art brain imaging, and they're going to be looking at that in relation to metabolic regulation. They have a lot of clinical facilities available. They're really a huge group. So that's terrific. And, for roughly the same price as other people were asking to do a study. Another study, Dr. Farasine in the US, she had a whole other study she could do if we provided the powder. Yeah, we can provide powder if you're going to do the rest of it. We definitely, because we looked at the project. Oh yeah, it's a good solid project. And then Dr. Orchard, this is another project where all they needed was powder. All they needed was powder. So these to me are, getting a lot of bang for the research buck by, through our connections with some of these people. Okay, so Peter asked me to just give a recent example of something that's gone through the pipeline. This paper came out in 2023. The original application to WBANA came in 2018. This is fast. Oftentimes it can be a lot slower to get from the point of proposal to the point of the publication is out. It's not, there's many things that come in the way and cause it to delays. So the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition is a very high-end journal, very prestigious journal. We like that. We like to have the research be in good, strong journals. So here, wild in the title, talking about vascular function, how well your blood vessels work, and cognitive, how well the brain works. in older people. So there they wanted older people. You know, they've looked at other groups, and this study was with older people. Those two names, Claire Williams and Ana Rodriguez Mateos, we've worked with them a lot over the years, and these are their various colleagues on the project. So recent research, this is just, I just put these tables there clipped out of the paper just to show you the level of detail that some of these things get to. First, table 1 is what is that blueberry powder? What does it have in it? And what does the placebo look like? If you look at anthocyanins, second from the bottom in the first table, you can see we've got 300 in the powder and 0 in the placebo. That's what we want. And then in the second table, that's just all of the measurements they've done on these people at the baseline, at the start of the study, the blood pressure, the blood vessel performance, the body weight, the blood pressure I mentioned already, age, and so on. So again, a lot of detail in these things. Oh, and I wanted to mention, yeah, so in this study, I mentioned these things do not have the potency of drugs, these compounds, but they do help things. So in this particular study, they did 5 different measurements, different methods to look at vascular blood vessel function. 2 of them, of the 5, had positive results. And then of the cognitive tests, the brain tests, they did the same thing. 5 different tests, 2 had positive results. And they looked at the whole community of gut bacteria, because that's a really important emerging story here. They didn't see an effect. So again, the effects are there. They get into good journals, but the effects, they're just foods. They're not drugs. So then trying to measure the impact of a study like this, again, this is out of my realm. This is in the realm of the public relations and marketing people, but we certainly do work with them to develop the messaging. But they have a whole set of metrics around how this material reaches the public that I don't really speak the language that well. So if you look there under March, that study I just showed you about the elderly people, vascular function, brain, that was called Blue Flow. And again, they monitor how many impressions, how many hits, and so on it gets in the press and in various media. And they're talking 76 million. So I don't know how they measure these things. But again, if you heard one of the presentations from these groups, they really parse this out. Who saw what? How long did they stay? Where, you know, all of the different questions about how much of their attention did we get here? And this is what we really want to know. Again, talking about influencers that talked about wild blueberries, other journals that talked about wild blueberries, but this is the way the word gets out. So just a couple of other recent examples of that. Well, the one on the right with those are cultivated blueberries, aren't they? You see, this is what we don't want. We want wild blueberries. Those are cultivated, right? Yeah, they are. So anyway, but that was a recent wild story, and it was on cognitive function. And Carol Cheatham, the scientist, she was interviewed, and in the interview she did mention wild, so that was good. So again, it got a lot of attention. The other one down in the corner there about manganese, I just mentioned that because this refers to looking at the whole space of nutrition and health. Manganese, they're not anthocyanins, but blueberries, wild blueberries have a lot of manganese in this. Really interesting. There's a lot of manganese. And here's one about boosting brain health, watching your manganese. So this is another kind of story that we can maybe develop. So just to wrap up, networking for impact. It's all about impact. The person in the slide here is Catherine Breuer, Kitty, we call her, and she is a nutrition advisor and spokesperson for WBANA Canada. She's a food professional and she belongs to a lot of societies and so on. She's also what I would call, I don't think she formally has that title, but I would call her the executive director of the committee. She really navigates all of the things that need to be done, communication with the scientists. She does all of that. And she also attends a lot of networking events and conferences on behalf of wild blueberries. And then she also in the past has hosted events, and we hope to host other events in the future. So her connectedness to the whole realm of food and health, fruits and vegetables and nutrition is very useful there. So more on networking. Again, the whole fruit, vegetable and health area of science research has just exploded in the last 25 years. So there's whole new societies and journals and conferences that are all on this topic. So in our case, we have many targeted conferences, a couple of the big ones, the Very Health Benefits Symposium. WBANA is a sponsor on that. The other one, the big one, Conference on Polyphenols and Health, and there's lots more. So again, it's networking at those events. And there you're looking for influencers. You want to connect with the people who can pick up the new research and get the story out. And you're also looking for the next high caliber researcher that has presented there and you said, whoa, what a terrific study you just published. Could you do that with blueberries? Could you do something similar with blueberries? And that's how we've gotten some of our very best researchers on board. And then networking on public health initiatives. And that's what the little graphic is about there, that there's enough interest around this now. Let's say anthocyanins. There's enough interest and evidence that even public health organizations are starting to look at this and say, maybe we need to be spending some of the taxpayers' money to get people to eat more of this stuff because we know it'll be good for their health. And once you get public health people on board for this, that's very powerful. That's terrific. I think then you say you've been successful in what you've tried to do. So a delicate question, but often asked, can and should wild compete with cultivated on health? And my short answer would be no, because cultivated has a massive budget for health research and everything they put out is absolutely relevant to us as well. We can piggyback on that if we want. Anthocyanins even more. So I say there's a lot more to be gained by sticking with them and walking with them down this path than there is to try to say we are better. We are better. You'd never in a health study demonstrate that we are better. You couldn't. No, you couldn't. So if we can't beat them on health, the way we need to do that is with product differentiation. And we've been talking about that a lot too. And I've just been preparing some stuff and presented some fact sheets or prepared some fact sheets. But that's where we need to show that we're different. We might just be as healthy, but man, there's other things about us that are just terrific. And again, I got information together on the differences in the fruit size and count, but about the taste, wild tastes better. There's 2 papers that have just come out from my colleague with Agriculture Canada. He's a flavor chemist. He has 2 really good papers that show, yeah, wild tastes better. I can tell you why it tastes better. And he's got the chemical analysis to tell you why it tastes better. Sugar acid balance, slightly sweeter. Their profile of acids, they're better tasting acids. The volatiles that you say, oh, I'm tasting blueberries. Yeah. Wild blueberries have more and more characteristic flavors like that. And then they also have a more consistent flavor because when you eat wild blueberries, you have that blend of a huge number of genotypes, a huge number of clones. While if you get frozen cultivated blueberries, you're getting one variety. It might be a good tasting one, might not be a good tasting, but you're getting one. So the next batch might taste very different from your other batch of cultivated. Wild, you get this large complex mix, and that's a good thing. And then of course the unique wild production method. So I think this is where we really need to tap into, along with the health message, advance the product differentiation, why wild is better and why it tastes better. So just to tell you a little who's who about the Health Research Committee, like Peter, and I think I mentioned it too, it is a joint committee between WBANA US and WBANA Canada. And Colleen Craig, who's with Wyman, she's now our chair, and she's been with us about 3 years and very dynamic and engaged. And yeah, it's good. Things are really rolling along here. Kitty really keeps it going day to day. Dave Bell has been with us since the health story began 25 years ago. John Gaddis, he's a medical person, and he's also a grower. David Yarbrough, who I think is on Zoom today, he's been with the health story all along. He's a production specialist, but he's been very much alongside. And now we're very happy that he's on the committee. He really fills some important gaps there. Eric Venturini is the Maine Wild Blueberry Commissioner, and then Jennifer Mascala, she does a lot of the recording and getting meetings organized. Now the members from Canada, we have the WBANA Executive Director, Neary, Peter Burgess, he's on the committee now and terrific to have him there, John Cameron, is here. I think I saw him, and he's also on the committee. And then I'm there as a WBANA Canada consultant. And just briefly, I spent about 20 years researching wild blueberry and anthocyanin health benefits with Ag Canada. And since I retired in 2017, I've been working with WBANA Canada on this stuff. So I have a long history with on the blueberry health benefits tour. So that's all I wanted to say. And really, if there's one piece of advice I could give to anybody, it's just eat blueberries.